Shortly.
5, 4, 3. Order. Welcome to this afternoon's hearing of the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Select Committee. We'll be hearing today from Simon Thompson, Chief Executive of Royal Mail, Keith Williams, the Chairman of International Distribution Services plc, the parent company of Royal Mail, and Ricky McCauley, who's the Operations Development Director at Royal Mail. Good afternoon to all three of you. This hearing has been called further to our hearing on the 17th of January due to the committee's concerns that several answers to our questions during that hearing didn't align with the information we subsequently received from postal workers across the country. Can I start by saying on behalf of the committee that we're grateful to everybody that got in touch with us after that hearing. I think we are nearing 1,500 communications from people across the country. I'm sorry that we weren't able to reply individually to all of those, but please know that all of them have been read and they have informed today's proceedings. We will revisit three particular sections today, as had been informed to the witnesses in advance, before taking broader questions from members of the committee. Those sections will be, firstly, the use of technology to track and discipline postal workers. Secondly, the delivery of the universal service obligation that requires Royal Mail to deliver letters 6 days a week. And thirdly, the Royal Mail sick pay policy. Before we begin, in the previous session, a member of the public gallery, I understand, displayed a poster which was broadcast on television, but which I didn't see. Can I remind members of the public gallery that you must remain silent during today's hearing and no props are allowed? If there are any props or disruptions, I'm afraid you'll be removed from the public gallery. Second, as the witnesses have been informed in advance, in Parliament we have a procedure for witnesses to take the oath, which we do not ordinarily use. But given the circumstances in which this is a recall hearing with allegations of misleading Parliament, we have decided on balance that we will ask the witnesses to take the oath today in line with those procedures available to the committee. In doing so, I remind the witnesses that you're obliged to tell the whole truth to this committee, and that any failure to do so will be considered a contempt of Parliament and a potential perjury for which individual sanctions may be followed. So before I begin, can I ask the clerk of the committee to administer the oath?
I'll just reaffirm. I'll affirm if that's okay.
If I could ask you to stand and read it.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I, Keith Williams, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give before this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
I, Simon Thompson, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give before this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I, Ricky McCauley, do solemnly and sincerely, truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give before this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Before we begin questions today, I should inform people viewing the session today that we'll be referring to a number of images at the start of each section, which will be displayed on the screens and on the broadcast on television. The witnesses and members of the committee have been given advance copy of this in the paginated bundle, and it's also been published on the committee website. Whilst those images are being broadcast, I will do my best to explain what we're seeing on the television and the broadcast for people watching remotely. So we'll now start with questions on section 1 in respect of the use of technology to track and discipline postal workers. If I could ask the clerk to display image 1 on the screen, please. So this appears to be a series of printed delivery route maps which have tracked postal workers doing their rounds, and there are a number of yellow dots on those maps and on those routes. If I could remove the image from the broadcast, please. Mr. Thompson, what are those yellow dots?
Those yellow dots display dwell time.
What is dwell time?
Time where a postal worker is stationary.
You're tracking a postal worker and whether they're moving or standing still. That's what those yellow dots show.
This is a system called Outdoor Actuals, which is something that was jointly developed with the CWU. We have a joint commitment for this back from April 2018. It's not information that's available in real time. As I said last time, we don't track the postal workers in real time, nor do we nudge them in terms of making sure that they go at the right pace. This is a system that is used to make sure that we balance the workload evenly across the whole of the team. And I just want to read something from the policy, and I did share this with the
Sorry,
committee.
Mr. Thompson, I don't mean to cut in, but we're very strict on time today, and I just need my questions to be answered. You'll have time to elaborate later. But the yellow dots specifically track whether a postal worker is standing still in a particular location for a particular length of time. And as I understand it, those dots get bigger if they're stood still for longer. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. That's part of our technology that we jointly use, the CWU, to make sure that our workload is balanced and even. Yes.
Understood. Thank you. If I can move to image 2 on the screen, please. So this is a bar chart which is taken from one of your delivery offices, which is tracking the stop time in minutes of individual postal workers on a given day on the 13th of February 2023. If I could remove the image, please. Why are you printing posters and displaying them in delivery offices, comparing individual postal workers and how long they stand still for at any particular time if you don't track them individually?
Yeah, I understand, and Ricky, maybe you can add to this one as well. We saw this evidence the other day, and that is actually a breach of our very clear policy and our agreement with the CWU.
Breach of policy. Okay, can I look at image 3, please? This is a photo of a whiteboard from another delivery office in another part of the country which says, as per Tuesday brief, don't get caught, alongside a list of postal workers and the speed of their deliveries. Can I remove the image from the broadcast, please? Is this another rogue action, Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, this was actually displayed on Workplace a couple of days, our internal social media tool, a couple of days after the last select committee meeting. It's actually from Medway Valley down in Kent. We were alarmed to see that. It definitely breaches our policy, and I think anything on there that says, don't get caught is clearly not what we do, and I don't believe it's representative at all of what happens. I actually visited that delivery office along with our Regional Operations Director, Sean, around about 10 days ago after we saw that, to really understand why it was that it happened at a local level.
Okay. You're claiming that you don't track and display the information about how postal workers are working. That's against Royal Mail policy, is what you're saying today.
It is, and what we discussed last time when we talked about the PDAs, and I did reread the evidence that I gave last time, is that when our postal workers are out using PDAs, it does not track them in real time at all, nor does it nudge them in terms of the speed, in terms of how it is that they move on, nor does it tell them which order to do anything in, and nor can any of the data that we've seen today be actually used in any form of performance management.
Understood. If I could look at image 4, please. This is a post that you posted on your internal communications channel where you're analysing the data of the speed of delivery of postal workers across the country. And I think you're suggesting that people that walk slower, deliver things more slowly. And you've said any views, ? On this, and you were feeling curious about what it meant about the speed of your postal workers. Can I remove the image, please? If you're telling me today that you don't track your workers, why did you post that?
I discussed it last time, actually, and I talked last time about our estimated delivery window. That is national anonymised data. The problem that we're trying to solve for the consumer is that our delivery windows are somewhere between 3 hours and 4 hours. What the consumer wants to do is not wait in or not go out in terms of having to pick their item up. That is an initiative that we've been working on to see if we can get a situation where we can reduce that window so we can actually be more market competitive. And that was why that was displayed. I have to say, it was a very, very good debate that we had with the postal workers, and one of the reasons why I put Workplace in was so we could get the direct feedback from the front of the business on how it is we could improve things for customers, which I have to say our postal workers are very much interested in doing.
I've seen lots of screenshots. It seems that you spend quite a lot of time on there talking to your workers. You made reference to transcript previously. In the last session, you said when we were talking about the use of technology, quote, "I'm not aware of technology we have in place that tells people to work more quickly. To the point you're making about this device telling people to go more quickly, this is not something we do. We do not use technology when someone returns back to the office in any form of penal way." And I take your point that in real time it might not be buzzing saying run more quickly, but I think it's quite clear based on the evidence that you are using technology to encourage people to be more quick and to rank them against their colleagues about who is and isn't the quickest at delivering their letters. And we've had written testimony from postal workers across the whole country. So far today you've said there have been a number of rogue delivery offices. But I have testimony literally covering the whole country. I mean, there's someone here from Nottinghamshire. I'd like to advise that information recorded on the PDA devices is 100% being used to discipline staff, and we're being pulled into the office daily. I've got a message here from a delivery office manager who says PDA data is available to all management levels and is used to discuss postie performance. Managers down the ladder are questioned whether performances have been challenged. The names are requested to ensure challenges are progressed through conduct if repeated. I mean, I could go on and on. It seems everyone in the business assumes you use this technology to track the speed of your workers, to enforce performance, and in some circumstances to discipline workers. Are you really telling us today, Mr. Thompson, that's not true?
Yes, I think that the systems that we use in terms of the outdoor actuals is all about balancing equal workload. And I did go and check whether we had a situation where this data was being used for performance management. Out of the 3.6 million walks that the team have done, we do around about 58,000 a day. Out of the 3.6 million walks they've done over the last 3 months, the only thing we can see is 16 conduct cases where data has actually been referenced. And a conduct case is a very severe and actually quite a rare occurrence. And if that data is requested for that particular situation, then that has to be referred to a human resources professional before that information would be released. So there is nothing that I can see that would say that this is being used as performance management. What I would also say is that we have very, very sophisticated internal systems where people can speak up, whether they can raise a grievance. We also very much publicise the speak up anonymous process that we have that I've really championed since I've come in the business, that if people are unhappy with how these things are being used, they should definitely tell us. Now, on the outdoor actuals, what we use it for, and this happens every single week, is a communication and a relationship between the CW rep and the manager to make sure that there is a balanced workload across the team and that everything is fair. That is what it is designed to do.
Just put yourself in the shoes of a postal worker, Mr. Thompson. You're coming into the delivery office. There's a poster on the wall. It ranks you against your other colleagues. There are whiteboards saying don't get called. I've got another testimony here from a 56-year-old postal worker who says that on several occasions his manager's spoken to him about not being efficient enough compared to his colleagues. He makes the case he's 56 and probably can't go as quickly as a 20-year-old. And this is another potential case of age discrimination. You used a phrase earlier where you said you use this technology to balance, what did you say?
Balance workload.
Balance workload. What does that mean?
Actually, Ricky, maybe...
Ricky, mind, Chair, in terms of the detail. So we use the information we get from the PDAs. It's by agreement with the CW back in 2018 to make sure that colleagues have, as Simon has said, fair and balanced workload. In a typical delivery unit, and just to expand on a word lapsing, you'll probably see it in some of the evidence. Typically, they'll be set with a base number of routes, maybe 50 routes in a delivery depot, but at certain times of the year, you'll need more or less than that. And we do use the PD Outdoor actual information as one source to understand where people are finishing before the schedule finish time or perhaps working over and need some work taken off them. But it is about balance in fairness. And
so if you found somebody that's too slow in your balance, what happens?
Well, that isn't something, we don't track walking speeds on the PD Outdoor actuals, but the type of environment, and we've looked at three specific... And
then how do you balance? You say you want to balance it. So
let me, if I can make the point, please, Chair. You presented 3 bits of evidence across 1,250 delivery units, specifically posters that have been displayed. In my experience...
Sorry, Mr. Macaulay, 1 second. I'm not asking you about the posters. I'm asking you to explain what the balance means. So if you're trying to balance across a group of postal workers how they're working, by their very nature, there will be a group of people who are slower than the average or the highest performers. What's the consequences for those people who are slower than the average when you're trying to balance this?
It's not a case that they're slower than the average. It may well be they're not completing the route to time.
If you're not completing the route on time, you're being slow, aren't you, by its very nature?
Well, absolutely, I don't accept that at all.
Well, then, I'm sorry, if you can't complete your route on time, there is a time target to complete the route. If you don't do it on time, you are by your very nature being too slow, aren't you?
That's not the accusation we would make of a postal worker. We would sit down with them and we would try and establish if they had a problem in their route, whether a road was closed, or is there any particular reason. The framing of how we behave in Royal Mail is not representative of what I see.
Sounds very unusual to me, Mr. Macaulay, just on the basis of the English language, might I say. Are there other members that would like to come in on the use of PDA? Andy MacDonald and then Uncle Alan.
Chair, I was interested in Mr. Thompson's comment that PDA data is being used in 16 conduct cases. So the data is being used in a disciplinary fashion. It's being used in pursuit of those cases. And we're hearing from postal workers, as the chair's outlined, that this information is indeed being used, and conversations are being had with line managers about performance based upon this data. Are they all wrong when they're telling us this, when they're putting that evidence in and saying, I am being tracked, that information is being used, and there are consequences for me in the workplace? Are you sitting here today telling us that they're all entirely wrong in their own lived experience?
Mr. MacDonald, I don't have the individual cases, and I would never say that our people lie. I find our people are very honest, actually, very, very honest. That's why we have trust at the doorstep. But what I would say, and it's important to set the context here, as I said earlier on, in the last 3 months, we've done 3.6 million walks, of which there have been 16 conduct cases where data has been used as supporting evidence. That is the information I have. It has not been used as a performance management tool, which I think is what we discussed last time I was here.
So this is a surprise to you to hear that it is, according to the perception of those postal workers, is being used as a performance management tool. If you'd accept, presumably, as Chief Executive, you would find that alarming and want to do something about it. So what actions have you taken subsequent to this information being revealed to instruct people that this data should not be used? Have you enshrined that in writing? Have you given instructions across your organisation that we can see and rely on?
No, Mr. MacDonald, it definitely needs following up. I had a discussion 2 days ago, which is when we had the evidence, or a day or so ago, when we had the evidence with the Chief Operating Officer, and what we absolutely commit to is to make sure that everybody is very clear on what the conditions are around the use of data. And I think it just needs to be absolutely exactly as per the policy that we had in April 2018 with the CW.
Sorry to interrupt you, but can you not understand how frustrating it is for members of the committee to hear that from you, that having had notice that this was a major area of concern, that today you're going to go away from this second hearing to say to your organisation, the people within it, this is what we are not going to use data in pursuit of these matters. Shouldn't have that been done a long, long time ago?
Well, Mr. MacDonald, what I would say is that in April 2018 we had a joint agreement with the CW to use the data in the way that has been said here. The cases that we've seen here, I totally agree with you, that the way that these things are displayed is not right. I agree with that, and we've absolutely dealt with them. I think, as we'd written to the committee the other week as well, is if there's any more evidence to give us, can you please supply us that evidence? We are more than happy to follow up. And I would say to any of the team that are out there, which we've always been very clear about, and I've absolutely always been very clear about, is if there's anything out there that's making them feel uncomfortable, please let us know. And we have the anonymous channels as well. But in addition to that, I think it's time, and we will absolutely go back and make sure that everyone is very, very clear on the conditions of data usage.
So you have a freedom to speak up process. Can you tell the committee how long that's been in place and how it's been utilised, and give some examples of some of the outcomes of that process? Because in lots of institutions, people will refer to such a process and you'll hear evidence that it's either not known, or when it does, people don't have trust in the system to make use of it. So can you tell us how long it's been in place and how effective it has been?
Well, what I'd say, Mr. MacDonald, is it's definitely been in place since I've been the CEO. I believe it was in place before I was the CEO as well. Also, that since I've been the CEO, we've very much proactively communicated the use of it. I don't have any data to hand, and I don't want to say anything that is not right. So I think in terms of the follow-up on that one, if it is okay with you, Mr. MacDonald, we'll definitely follow up after the session with some more robust information.
Yeah, I think that it's a very important part of the process, isn't it? When you've got a system that allows people to say, look, I'm not happy with this. There's a problem here. And you come here today, a second hearing, and can't tell us anything about the freedom to speak up process that you've relied upon. Finally, for me, Chair, can I just turn to Mr. Macaulay? I'm really trying to get a head round how it can possibly be that you have a system where data is amassed and you're saying it's not used for performance management. I've got to ask myself, what's the purpose of it if it's not going to manage and monitor the performance of the individuals who are carrying around these PDA units? I don't get it. I don't understand it.
It's laid out quite clearly how it should be used in a joint agreement with the CWU, and it provides information about, I suppose, how the workload in the organisation translates into the time taken to do delivery routes out in the street, or 58,000 delivery routes. It does provide information when people exit the building. It breaks a geofence, so we know they've started the route. And then when they come back in, it breaks the geofence coming back into the building. All that's laid out in the joint agreement with the CWU. But I think the important point I want to make, and there are some examples of where I don't approve of what's been shown in the 3 examples that have been shown, but I have to challenge firmly the generalisation of the culture that we're trying to create at Royal Mail. We try to create a supportive culture, where postal workers get the support and help that they need. Particularly, we mentioned people that are elderly, different types of jobs they're able to do later in their career, and people covered by the Equality Act as well. We're a very responsible employer when it comes to how we treat our people. In our most recent engagement survey, 50,000 colleagues, there's a key attribute in that: the line manager treats me fairly, has improved by 7 points to 80%. It's one of our highest scores, so we don't see that in our local relationships. We've clearly got room for improvement, and we wholly accept that.
Thank you. I've got about 5 minutes left on this section, so Ian and then Alan.
Just very briefly, the information I'm getting from individuals is that this is a performance management tool. Among other things, which has been explained by Mr. Thompson and by Mr. Macaulay, I accept that. It's been mentioned 2 or 3 times that this is a total agreement with the CWU. I wonder whether the CWU have made any representations to the Royal Mail with regard to the PDA. And I know that Mr. Thompson said he didn't recognise what the PDA or the PV, I think it was, the last time, which I think was very contemptible because he knew what we're speaking about. But I want to know if the CWU have made any representations. And the second point I would make, just to be very, very quick, is that in the questions from the chair, it was said that there was been at least 2 breaches of policy, I think probably at regional level. What does that mean? Have you got rogue management? Are you under control of the management structures you have in place? Or is that just simply not the case? If you've got proper structures in place, surely as senior leaders within the Royal Mail, you'll have a clear understanding of what's happening with your staff. If you haven't, by goodness, you should have, shouldn't you?
Mr. Lavery, a couple of things from my side. I didn't know what PVA meant last time, just to be nice and clear. I was not being difficult or swerving.
Not true.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lavery, we'll just have to have a different point of view on that one. But I absolutely know what it...
I treat with contempt.
No, I disagree, Mr. Lavery. I'm sorry, I disagree. PDA, I absolutely understand what it is. I did not understand what PVA is, just to be nice and clear. I think on your second point, I think it's a really important point, because I made the largest change in organisational structure for the operations that the company had seen in 30 years. That was delayered, the organisation was delayered. We moved the accountability to the front line of the business, where close to the customer, where the manager and the posties can work together. And I also made sure that we reduced the team size in terms of the spans, in terms of a manager towards the posties. And the reason I did that was so that those relationships are as good as they can be, and it's very clear what it is that's going on. And, you know, the point that Ricky has made is absolutely right, is that if we actually have a look, we did a recent survey. It was over 50,000 people responded to this in the last 6 months. And the key question was, does your manager treat you fairly? It's a very clear question. And the answer was, in a very positive yes, 79% of the times, plus 7%. Over the last 6 months, and let's be frank about it, the last 6 months with industrial action in the organisation has not been the happiest situation. There has been tension. I would suggest that maybe it has not been at its best, for understandable reasons. And I have to say, I must stand firm with all of our managers who, frankly, I find, on the vast majority of the occasions, in fact, actually all the occasions when I meet them, are actually decent people trying to do the right thing. Now, have some people got some things wrong? Clearly they have. And we've clearly addressed some of them, including me actually visiting one place. And you can imagine as a CEO, when 2 days after we have a select committee meeting, and what we see is some of these things that you've shown today, you can imagine my reaction to it is not positive, which is why we go and address the issues. And all I would say to the team that's out there, if there are things that are happening that's making them uncomfortable, please let us know or let our processors know. And I accept Mr. MacDonald's point in terms of a follow-up from today on Speak Up.
79% is a huge mandate, by the way, I agree with you. I really think that's important coming from yourself to understand that. Just a very brief question. The yellow dot, it increases in size. Is there a real-time alarm?
No.
There's not?
No. Not that I am aware. I'm going to say I'm aware of, because I don't want to get anything wrong.
My information,
Ricky?
Just to clarify it, Mr. McCauley, my information from individuals in the workplace suggests that if the dot gets bigger, then there's an alarm after 1 minute.
Right, Ricky?
So, to the best of my knowledge, that's not the case. Given we're under oath, I would like to take the opportunity to
check.
Absolutely.
If we check
it.
I don't believe so either. But we'll
and the reason I say it's not in real time, and the managers don't actually get to see the data to the next day, so we certainly don't haul people into delivery offices when they come back out of delivery. They don't have the data to the next day, and we don't do any hauling, full stop.
But Ricky, I think we are under oath today, and I think we'll double check if that's okay, and we'll come back and correspond. Let's double check. But I do believe, I agree with Ricky, I think the answer's no. But
thank you. Just for any other witnesses watching, you should do that whether you're under oath or not. But we're very tight on time, but I know Alan and Mark want to come in, so Alan first and then Mark.
On that, I did a visit to my local depot and I was assured that the real-time monitoring doesn't happen and the managers can't access it, so I actually accept that. But on that yellow dot getting bigger, if PDA information has not been used to monitor individuals, it's not been used as any nudge behaviour, why do we have a system that the day after the postmen have done their route, why does management look at data that has these dots that get bigger for any stop time? What's the point of them looking at data with big yellow dots if it's not to monitor individuals?
Ricky, maybe if I start and then you can follow. Mr. Brown, by the way, thank you very much for visiting the team. I think it was in Kilmarnock. They very much appreciated your visit, and I know you spent a fair bit of time with the managers and the postal workers as well, so thank you very much for that. In terms of the size of the dot, I actually had this discussion with an official from Unite, from the managers' side of things, and the way they described it to me, which is there is a duty of care. If for some reason somebody has got stuck on a route or is spending an awful lot of time in a particular case, or in fact is not taking their breaks as they should, then there is actually a duty of care to make sure that everything is okay. Ricky, from your operational experience, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add. Or
Mr. Brown, it's very much covered in the 2018 agreement with the CWU. And it's used to generate, where required, not all the time, but a follow-up conversation to understand why a stop may have been excessively wrong. And what was that trying to combat? One of the things that actually postmen and postwomen feel really passionate about, and that is that there's equitable and fair workload. And talking about our engagement surveys, that's one of the things that always used to come up as a frequent issue, is the workload fair and balanced, and that gives us the opportunity to understand any imbalance.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Just a quick one, and perhaps Mr. Williams might like to answer. How widespread is this technology in this sector, and what would be the consequences to your organisation if you didn't have it available to you?
Yeah, it is widespread in the sector and has been for a number of years. I think the PDAs in Royal Mail's case have been in gestation for something like 9-10 years. To get
2007,
2007,
I think, Keith.
So the technology's been around a long time. Can I just add one comment on just stepping back? There's actually a 5-stage process here for resolution of issues with PDAs or anything else. There's a weekly meeting between the rep and the manager. There's a monthly meeting through the agreement, I think. Then there's the trust survey, which Mr. Thompson spoke about, which is the 50,000 people who input into how do they feel about their manager, and that score is increasing. And then the board gets involved at 2 additional levels. One is what's called employee voice, where the board goes directly to the workforce to ascertain if there's any issues that are affecting the workforce. So that's direct engagement from board to workforce. And then the last one is Speak Up survey, which is a sort of common practice in companies, where people, if they have an anonymous complaint to make, or any complaint to make, they can make it anonymously without management involvement.
Would your business be less efficient and less able to compete without the data that this provides?
Oh, certainly. Look. We don't go anywhere near as far as other companies do in this respect. Look, and I think I was involved a little bit on the agreement on the PDAs, and my recollection of it is what we agreed with the union. It wouldn't be the sole usage of information for disciplinary purposes. That was the conversation I had.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to move on to section 2, where we'll be talking about the obligation on Royal Mail to deliver letters 6 days a week, or what we refer to as the Universal Service Obligation, or the USO. Mr. Thompson, Ruth Edwards asked you a number of questions about this on the 17th of January, and she asked whether it was Royal Mail policy to prioritise parcels over letters. And you said, quote, "No, that is absolutely not true." And you went on to say, quote, "Our policy is very clear that letters and parcels are equal." Do you stand by those answers?
Do.
Can I have the next image displayed on the screen, please? This was the poster I referred to in the last session, which showed that letters were being deprioritised compared to track items, special delivery and parcels. If I could remove the image from the screen, please. Since then, you've provided the committee with a letter from 2 of your employees at the Gloucester North delivery office, where they say that this was a poster they had done, they'd put it up, it was an error, it was only up for 15 hours, and it was to do with health and safety, not with real instructions about prioritising letters or parcels differently. You stand by this submission?
I do, and just a little, just to add a little bit more, Chair, if you don't mind, is
really
that...
I just want to know if you stand by this, that it was a one-off rogue poster.
Absolutely. That is. I thought that Shane and Peter came forward and were very clear that that was their poster and it was not something that had been done centrally, and they had done it based on the circumstances in the Gloucester North delivery office.
Okay, thank you. I'm now just going to refer to a number of images before I then come back to questions. So if I can show image 6 on the screen, please. This is a typed up version, I think, of the same poster from a different delivery office in a different part of the country, which essentially deprioritises letters before tracked items and parcels. If I could go to image 7, please. This is another version of a poster that's been typed up and attached to a rack in another delivery office in another part of the country, which says if you're unable to complete letters, you can do it the next day, and you've got to focus on tracked and special delivery items. Image 8, please. This is a script for managers to read out in their huddles on the kind of delivery office floor from another part of the country, which essentially says the same thing. Image 9, please. This is a pop-up whiteboard that was from another delivery office in another part of the country, which said, do not prep one letter unless you're basically taking everything else first. And the next image, please. This is another version of a written version of that poster from another delivery office in another part of the country that says the same thing. And I think, is there another image? Yeah, and this was the set of instructions that were given in another delivery office in another part of the country that says, mail is to be delivered at a minimum every other day. If I could stop broadcasting the images, please. Are all of these rogue posters, Mr. Thompson, or do you not know what's going on in your business?
No, not all of them are road posters, and when I answer the question, I answer it again. Our policy is absolutely clear that letters and parcels have exactly the same priority.
Why are there so many posters in delivery offices all across the country that say the complete opposite of what you've just said to the committee?
No, I understand the question. Of course, what we see here is what happens on days of industrial action, where we have to take a different policy and something that is actually being discussed with Ofcom and also something that we publish on our website. On days of industrial action, our reality is if we don't have maybe around about 100,000 of the team actually in, the reality is we cannot deliver our normal standard of service and have to take some different choices. And that is what we have to do, and that is what you're seeing. But if it's all right with yourself, I think, Ricky, you were involved with these discussions around what we do in industrial action.
Just before I invite Mr. Macaulay to come in, I just want to say to you, Mr. Thompson, we've also been sent video footage and audio recordings of discussions between managers and postal workers, of huddles on the delivery office shop floor, not just during periods running up to or during industrial action, but over many, many months, with a delivery office manager saying to the postal workers in a particular office, look, we've breached the USO for 3 years in a row, just do as I tell you. You've got to take out the tracked items and the parcels first. If you haven't got the capacity or the time to deliver the letters, do not worry about it. So I just want to ask you a very specific question, Mr. Thompson, reminding you that you're under oath today. Do you know whether there are verbal briefings cascaded through the business that require your managers to tell your postal workers to deprioritise letters? Do you know that there are verbal briefings cascaded through the business with that instruction, yes or no?
I'm not aware of that as a policy at all.
You're not aware. Mr. Macaulay, are you aware?
If I could expand, because I think
I asked you a question. Are you aware that there are verbal briefings being cascaded through the business that tell postal workers to deprioritise letters, yes or no?
In case of industrial action, yes.
Before industrial action?
On the day of industrial action and in recovery.
Before industrial action?
Well, industrial action has been going on for 6 months, and prior to that we had a global pandemic that impacted the business for 18 months. Both had a set of contingency arrangements that were shared with Ofcom very openly. They did require, for safety reasons, and just to give some context, the cubic volume of parcels in our network, if we don't at times keep parcels moving, the network will grind to a halt.
Ofcom gave you notice of this during the pandemic. When you didn't meet your obligations in the pandemic, Ofcom said, fine, there was an increase in parcels and you needed to construct your business and your sites to handle that. They did not allow you to carry on with that excuse for very long, and you're still claiming that's the reason why.
I'm not. I'm saying 6 months of industrial action is the reason why.
So now it's the industrial action following the pandemic. It's got nothing to do with Royal Mail policy. That's being briefed through managers to tell postal workers to deprioritise their letters.
Absolutely not.
Chair, can I just make one? I did write to the committee a couple of days ago, and I understand you might still be. I don't know whether you had a chance to read my letter.
Read everything, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, well, one of the facts that we actually shared was we shared a USO performance of letters versus parcels, and what it actually showed is that letter performance was marginally better than parcels performance for USO products. It showed that very, very clearly, and I think that is an outcome, an output of what we have. The other thing as well is that when I check the USO regulation, the target that we are given from a USO perspective is a total target. It's not something that's separated for parcels or for letters.
I'm aware of the USO target. You don't need to explain it to me, Mr. Thompson, with respect. Just to go to testimonies around the USO, because again, we have emails from postal workers pretty much across the entire country, too many to be able to read out to you today. For Scotland, for example, managers were telling us over Christmas to leave mail and concentrate on tracked parcels over anything else. If we couldn't manage mail, to just leave it. Mail was often left in the frames for days, including doctors' letters and more. Same in London. Another location, in the lead up to Christmas, we were told on a daily basis to leave mail and deliver parcels. I have a message here from a processing manager who says posties have told you in deliveries and processing if there are competing priorities between parcels and tracked items, priority is given to those over letters. And as managers, we are told to do this by our managers. I have another email from a national senior manager who has said it has absolutely been the case that all operational units have been instructed to prioritise parcels and to leave letters. This has been the case since the beginning of November. I have another example from Scotland, from Sussex, from Bath, from Staffordshire, from London, from Wales. Someone from Wales tell me that the way that management look at whether letters are being delivered, if you put them in a box under the table as opposed to putting them into the rack, it's treated differently. I could go on and on and on. A postman from Cambridgeshire, for at least the last 18 months, we have been told on a daily basis through huddles on the shop floor from our line manager that we are to prioritise tracked packets over letters. You have not been delivering your universal service obligation of delivering letters 6 days a week for some time. That's right, isn't it, Mr. Thompson?
Yes, I think that's right, and I mentioned that last time, but I'd just like to pick up on a couple of things that you said there. You mentioned November, you mentioned December. If you take December, we had 7 days of industrial action between the start of December and actually the 24th of December. Now let's just put this into context. We deliver during that period of time around about 600 letters a second and around about 130, 140 parcels per second. If we have a situation where there is 1 day of industrial action, particularly with letters, which is a huge volume, the ability to be able to catch that back up is a real challenge. And Ricky, I don't know if you want to add to that based on what
I've not finished yet, I'm afraid. I will call you Mr. Macaulay when I'm ready to hear from you. Looking at the transcript, Mr. Thompson, from when you were here last time, you were asked a very direct question. Postal workers have been told to prioritise parcels over letters. Is this accurate? ? You said to this committee, no, that is absolutely not true. Today, you're saying it is true, aren't you, Mr. Thompson?
It's not our policy, but in realities of industrial action, we have to apply a different policy.
You're recognising that what you told the committee last time was inaccurate.
No, I think it's the context. When I was asked last time, what I heard was, is there a policy of doing a different set of... And the answer is no. And I think what we see in the numbers here for Q1 and Q2 is very clear that actually our letter performance is slightly ahead of our parcels performance, and that is the factual reality of the outcome in terms of the customer piece. What I should have been clearer on is that at moments of industrial action, when we have that mass disruption, then there is a different application of policy, which we actually publicise on our website and also discuss with Ofcom as well, which is an operational reality, which Ricky has also referenced.
The problem was that you weren't listening to the question as opposed to misleading the committee with your answer. Is that what you're telling us today?
I heard a different context.
You heard a different question?
A different context.
That's your answer. I mean, it's quite remarkable. I mean, Mr. Williams, whether it's on the use of PDA and the way you discipline workers or rank workers against each other, whether it's on the verbal briefings very clearly cascading through the business, telling postal workers to do something, and then coming to this committee and telling us that's not true, are there really that many rogue managers and postal workers dispersed through the entire Royal Mail network going against company policy, or is all of this just a sham?
Well, if you look at the size of Royal Mail, it's 115,000 workers, so it's it can fill Wembley Stadium.
How many rogue managers do you think you have? How many rogue postal workers do you think you have? The thousands of emails we've received since the last session telling us the way things operate in your business, and all of you are telling us today that they're all wrong.
Well, all I can go by is the evidence that I see, and on the feedback that I see from 50,000 people, is that those 50,000 people, the trust score in their manager has increased.
I'm not asking you about the trust in their manager. I'm asking about Royal Mail's delivery of the universal service obligation. Surely as chair of the board, as a board, you should have grave concerns about this state of affairs.
So, between March 2020 and August 2022, Ofcom accepted that the quality of service would not be ideal. They accepted that because absence at Royal Mail was running at anything up to 18.1%. So 1 in 5 workers was absent. Yeah. So Ofcom accepted during that period that the quality of service would not meet its target. After August 2022, that has now disappeared. And we look at quality of service as a board, every board meeting, every week even at the moment on quality of service, given the industrial action.
Sure. I've spoken to Ofcom, and Mr. Thompson, I'll just come back to you here to just check what your obligations are. And they've said to me that if there's any failure of Royal Mail to offer a 6 days per week letters delivery service, any failure, that is a breach of the USO. There is clear evidence today, I think you've admitted it, that you've not been able to deliver the 6 days per week letter delivery obligation. You've blamed the industrial action for that, and previously you blamed the pandemic for it. Ofcom have said that if there's evidence of a systemic failure to seek to offer 6 days per week letter delivery service, that is a breach that requires investigation and potential enforcement. I'm putting it to you today, Mr. Thompson, that there is a systemic failure because you have verbal briefings going through your managers to your postal workers repeatedly over many, many months across the whole country that says, do not worry about delivering your letters for 6 days a week. Do you recognise that, yes or no?
As I wrote in my letter, Chair, it was very, very clear as I wrote in my letter, and I gave evidence, including communications from myself. On March 2022, I wrote a column in the Courier magazine that was sent to every employee's home that made it very,
Mr. Thompson, I'm not asking you about a column that you wrote in a magazine. I'm asking you whether you recognise that the fact that managers through your business are verbally cascading briefings to postal workers to not worry about letters being delivered every single day for 6 days of the week, that by its very nature is a systemic failure because it is a system-wide failure. I'm asking you whether you agree with that, yes or no.
We do everything that we can to
make sure... Do you agree with what I just said, yes or no?
Can I, just for clarity again, Chair, just so that I'm clear on the question so I can answer it clearly, please.
Is there a systemic failure, a system-wide failure, at Royal Mail to deliver letters every day for 6 days each week because there are verbal briefings cascaded through the business that tell postal workers not to worry about delivering letters every day for 6 days a week? That is a system-wide failure. It is a systemic failure. It is therefore a breach of your universal service obligation. Do you recognise the system-wide failure that is currently taking place at Royal Mail?
I totally understand, based on the
Not understand. Do you agree with me, yes or no?
Our USO performance has definitely not been good enough.
Do you agree with me that it is a system-wide failure, yes or no?
It's hard for... I'm sorry, Chair, and I can see that you're getting frustrated with it.
I'd like you to answer the question.
I can see you're getting frustrated with it. I do not recognise those briefings. I understand during...
You disagree there's a system-wide failure. You disagree with that?
No, we are definitely not achieving USO, and as I've said in correspondence and said around this committee many times, that it is my commitment to make sure we're doing better, and I would like to say that what I've seen recently is we are definitely doing better.
Okay, we need to move on. Are there other members? Alan Brown, please.
Just on that prioritisation, so again, visiting and hearing firsthand, it was made crystal clear at the Kilmarnock Depot that the policy is if a run's not going to be completed in time, parcels must be delivered, letters returned and the letters delivered the next day. Now that can be argued that's just a 1 day delay, but that's a policy that's operational day in, day out, not just because of industrial action, not because of the pandemic, not because of any, that's standard procedure. So surely that's coming from top down.
So if I could comment on that, Mr Brown, what you're referring to is a contingency plan. And it's not just a day of industrial action or 7 days over the month of December. It takes a number of days to recover, and everything that you've referred to is in the documents that I personally presented to Ofcom about how we would manage the industrial action.
If you're not prioritising, why is a contingency? Yes, we get the parcels out, the letters come back, the letters that could be doctor's appointments.
So in the contingency arrangement, and as I explained, the sheer volume that the parcels take up in our network, if we don't keep parcels moving, we grind to a halt and we would need to shut the door at the front end. And we don't want to do that to our customers. It would damage a lot of the e-tailers that rely on Royal Mail, who have no choice at that time of year. In such an instance, if we can't get all the letters completed, the next day you would cover the route that hasn't been completed. But that is a contingency arrangement, quite different to what Simon's referring to in terms of the business as usual policy.
Why is it understood to be the day in, day out process rather than just a contingency?
That's not my understanding. If there's a specific piece of evidence, I'm happy to look at it, Mr Brown, but that's not my understanding of how we operate on a day-to-day basis.
on this the contingency and saying you can't have parcels building up, what's to say in terms of local capacity, whether there is room for some parcels to come back to the sorting office and the letters go out? Why is it blanket, it's parcels that are prioritised over letters?
It's very much, it would be a local decision. If they didn't have a space constraint issue, and that's very much the reason we do it, to get the roll containers back to the front end of the network so we can inject more parcels in. But if it's not a space constrained issue, then we would expect managers to use local judgment on that point and to find a good balance in contingency to keep everything moving.
Obviously, you said there was a contingency and you're calling it a contingency, but where in your contingency is it left to or made clear that there's local, local assessment, local judgment can be used rather than what seems to be the top-down contingency that you're calling it parcels must be prioritised?
Well,
is there any guidance given to give leeway?
Should we be based on space constraint in the unit, the sheer volume of parcels on hand and due to be fed into the unit? We've got 1,250 delivery units, and they all recover at a different rate. 12,000 colleagues worked during the last strike, so in fact many of the units operated as normal and recovered very, very quickly. So every unit is uniquely different, and what we try to give is guidance that's applied locally.
Back to it seemed to me that was day in, day out policy, not one-off contingency we're catching up.
Okay, thank you. Mark Porsey, please.
Mr Thompson, when you gave evidence last time, you said at in answer to the Chair's question 31, you said, what I'm focused on, as I said before, is changing the business so we can compete in the parcels market. Now, that's a choice you've made. You'd like to compete in the parcels market, but you've got a statutory obligation to deliver 6 days a week. Isn't the evidence before us that you can't do both? You've got to do one or the other.
No, I think we can do both. And what I've said,
but you're clearly not doing both. You've accepted that in your answers to the chairman.
No, I've said very clearly, and I said last time, that we need to improve our quality of service on the USO. And actually, when I look at Keith mentioned that he looks at the information frequently. I look at it absolutely every single day, and I think the team are starting to make progress. But the other thing that we do need to understand is the context of our reality. If I take the first 9 months of this year versus the first 9 months of pre-pandemic, our letter volumes are down 1.8 billion items, around about £400 million less revenue. Over 50% of our business is now parcels. That is our future, and what I always say is we need to compete in the parcels market whilst also meeting our USO obligation.
You're not, and so therefore, isn't this a bad time for you attempting to compete with those other people out there who are providing a good service, that you're not able to do it because arguably you've got this obligation hanging around your neck. You've got to, that's fundamental to your business in a way that it isn't to others.
Yes, that is true. We do have a different context, and we were clear, and I did discuss it last time, that if we look through the eye of the customer, what our customer is asking for is a 7-day parcel service to and from their doorstep, and a 5-day. Please excuse me, Mr. Porsey, I don't want to speak over the top of you because that would be really impolite. If you don't mind, if I can just finish, is that they want a 7-day parcel service to and from their doorstep. That is more of our revenue now. That is the growth in the market, but on letters. What our customers have also said is that a 5-day letter service would be okay for them.
That's not the universal service obligation to
correct.
Which you are obligated right
Yes,
now. And so therefore, my question to you, isn't this a bad time for you to be seeking to make this change within your organisation because you haven't got the capability to do it?
I don't have a choice but to make these changes. Obviously it's a daily challenge to manage a business which is in decline, and also to compete with some competitors that do not have the reality of the USO and the parcels market. That is a challenge. But I have no choice but to compete in the parcels market, because if I have a situation as a leader of this business where I do not grow this business in the parcels market, accepting structural decline in letters, then frankly that's less jobs for my team. And my job is to have more great jobs for the team. I don't have a choice, Mr. Porsey. I have to do both. And it is challenging.
Good.
Andy McDonald, please.
Thanks, Chair. Mr Thompson, you used the phrase context of reality. I'm not quite sure what that means. I'm just interested in reality and in the truth of these situations. We have seen endless numbers of pieces of evidence that show that universal obligation was not observed. Are you saying to us that that is not correct? There hasn't been a system-wide failure and that hasn't happened?
I think over the last few months with industrial action during peak, USO performance has definitely been challenging. We will be updating or releasing our results for Q3 very, very soon, actually in the next week or so.
So there is some derogation from compliance with the USO. We've heard from Mr Macaulay that there are, was it 1,250 delivery units?
Yes.
And it's up to them and their localities to decide on priorities. So these posters that we've seen, these instructions have emanated from those sources. Where is the document that governs this? Where's the guidance from head office, and where is the derogation from Ofcom?
So, Sam, you happy if I take that? So, Mr MacDonald, what we operate during the industrial action is a national control centre, a regional control centre, and then more local control centres. Prior to industrial action, all the managers attended a workshop to take them through the details of what our contingency arrangements are. There's elements of that contingency arrangement our competitors would love to get their hands on, parcel competitors in particular. So it is not widely circulated or shared, but we did take all of the management team through workshops to get consistency in how we apply the contingency arrangements locally. As I said, the only time where we do, in exceptional circumstances, prioritise parcels over letter is where there's an absolute necessity due to space and getting containers back to the front of the network, so we don't need to close the
Don't want to stop your flow, but where is your evidence that the evidence that we've seen obtains only in reference to strikes? How confident are you that that is the case and it doesn't apply out with periods of industrial action?
I think we have the evidence. It'd be good to get the locations and the whereabouts of that. I don't know if we get that subsequently to the committee. It would be very helpful.
None of them said due to industrial action X, Y, and Z. Yeah. That was a setting out a prioritisation of parcels over letters. No reference was made to industrial action.
We've had industrial action for the last 5 months, so I don't have the dates of the evidence or where they've came from, other than the ones that have been given the specific location. If we can get that, then we're happy to follow up. And as Simon said, from the point of view of the committee, if there's more we need to do to make sure everybody is very, very clear, then
it's not for us to interrogate this. It's up for you to be able to respond to these things and have the information available to yourselves, not for us to give information about your own organisation back to you. Isn't that not the case? Or are you totally out of control of your own business?
I would say we are at all, no. We recovered very quickly from the industrial action, so I think your contingency plans worked well.
Yeah. Ian, did you want to?
No, I'm fine.
You're okay. I mean, as I say, we can't share the video and audio evidence that we had because it's too difficult to get consent from everybody in those videos and audio recordings to be able to do so. But there are delivery managers in delivery offices saying to their workers that you've all knowingly been in breach of your universal service obligation for years. Not a matter of months or due to industrial relation, for years. And that seems to be quite well known. I mean, Mr. Williams, I just want to ask about some of the incentives that you've structured from a board level from your remuneration committee and how that relates to this issue, because there's been some suggestion that by incentivising certain things over other things, that's why understandably managers and senior managers are prioritising that. I mean, when I looked at the long-term incentive plan, we talked about this last time you were here, Mr. Thompson, this is for 2020 to 2021, the various measures for bonus payments and share, I think, shares being awarded, are total shareholder return, UK operating profit, UK parcels revenue, money made at GLS and cash flow at GLS as that relates to the GLS board and chairman. But for Mr. Thompson here, it's just parcels, profit and shareholder returns. There's no mention of compliance with your legal obligations Why is that not in the incentive plan?
That's the long-term incentive plan that you're looking at, and we can discuss that in a second.
That's the question I'm asking.
Yeah,
why is it not?
So it's in the short-term measures.
First-class quality of service.
Yes.
Which is given a weighting of
quality.
7.
Yeah, and that is because at the time we were looking at quality of service, we were in the period of COVID in terms of measurement of quality of service.
I don't understand why the delivery of the USA was not incentivised in the long-term incentive plan. Try me again. Why is it not in there? Why is the delivery of letters in line with the USO not included in the long-term incentive plan?
It's because the long-term incentive plan for Royal Mail, and we can come to it later on if you wish, is really around the transformation of the business.
The letters aren't important.
And it goes back to Mr. Porcy's point, actually, and I was going to make it, is letters are very important to Royal Mail because...
Only in the short term?
No, well, in the long term as well.
Why is it not in the long-term incentive plan?
Let me explain.
Please.
Can I answer both points?
No, I'd like to answer my question, Mr. Williams. You've not explained why you've taken an active decision to write off, to exclude letter deliveries and the USO from the long-term incentive plan. It suggests that either it's not a priority. Let me finish. It's either a suggestion it's either not a priority or you hope not to be obligated to deliver it in the long term. There must have been a rationale for not including it in the long-term incentive plan.
We have the obligation. The reason it's not the reason of the balance in the long-term incentive plan is Mr. Porcy's point, which is if you look at the business is transforming out of a letters where at privatisation we were delivering 17 billion letters. Today, we're delivering about 8 billion letters. That is because e-substitution is acting to reduce the volume of letters, and it has been since privatisation, by about 8% a year. Royal Mail is increasing its parcels revenue, which is offsetting that decline in letters. Customers, who are crucially important to this, customers want more parcels. And they're sending less letters.
I understand. So your argument basically is, for the long-term survival of the business, you've got to get the commercials right, and the commercials are being driven by parcels, not the legal obligation to deliver letters.
No. The legal obligation. So under the legal obligation is that over the past years, on second-class delivery, we've always met second-class delivery, except during COVID, and we were given an exemption from Ofcom. On first-class delivery, we've missed on 3 occasions. Yeah, on 3 occasions since privatisation. And to Mr. Thompson's point is that's something that we will work on post the current industrial action.
Okay. What I'm trying to understand is that normally in a long-term incentive plan, you put the kind of business's long-term goals and objectives to incentivise your people to deliver on them. So you've taken the decision, you've explained why letters are not included in the long-term incentive plan. I can therefore only assume that you recognise it's a legal obligation and you just have to, it's kind of business as usual, you have to comply with it. So if that's the case, given that we have heard today that you've been in breach of that legal obligation, it's not an issue about bonus, is it? It's an issue about the core performance of your senior leaders. I mean, they're in breach of their own performance requirements, right?
That core performance is impacted in the short term by industrial action and in COVID.
I'd have to say I'm not particularly persuaded that there's a theme to your answers today, gentlemen. There's a theme, which is we have rogue posters, we have rogue managers, we have isolated incidences, we've got a global pandemic, we've got industrial action. It's everyone else's fault. Everyone else's fault that there are all of these problems. Nothing to do with me, Gov. Nothing to do with me. Can you see, based on all of the information we've had, why it's difficult for me to agree with the way you're presenting your cases today?
I do, actually. I think that, look, the business in COVID, and if you look at it against other postal services around Europe, the business performed very well during COVID, actually. It was delivering test kits, and this is down to the testimony of the people at Royal Mail.
Yeah, your workers.
Who worked during COVID.
Yeah.
And we can look at how their performance and reward during that period. because that was important to Royal Mail at that point in time and still is today. So during COVID, the business, relative to other European postal services, actually performed very well.
Okay, I agree with you that the postal workers are key workers. They worked enormously hard through the pandemic in difficult circumstances alongside lots of other key workers. So I just want to move now on to sick pay policy. In the hearing on the 17th, Mr. Thompson, you said to us, for the first 3 days of absence in any year, you would get full pay. That's no longer the case, is it, when it's before, during or after industrial action? Royal Mail policy now is to assume that you do not get paid unless you prove otherwise, that in your view, someone was sick enough.
No, our policy is absolutely the same today as it was during industrial action as it was before.
Why do I have copies of letters from your HR department to your staff that says before, during or after a period of industrial action, you were assumed not to be genuinely sick unless you prove otherwise, and pay has been deducted from people's pay slips automatically? That's a complete opposite of what you say your policy is, isn't it?
Our policy is that any absence has to be genuine and reasonable, and that absolutely didn't change. But to your point, Jeff, that we did see during industrial action that there was a peak or an increase in absence either days before or on industrial action. And at that point in time, the manager, which is our normal reality, would say, is that a genuine or reasonable absence? And as long as a fit note or whatever else it is was supplied, then that absence would be paid. We had around about 10,000 absences during that particular period of time. And at the moment, we have around about 350. The team will double validate that number, but I think it's around about 4%. Where people are challenging the fact that they didn't get sick pay, and that will go through the normal processes that we have. But I just want to set the context. I think it's important to set the context that out of 10,000, there is a question of around about 350.
You say that a worker would need to present a fit note. Where do you get a fit note?
You get a fit note from your local pharmacy, from your doctor. I think that policy, that legislation changed about 6 months ago, and I think it's a much broader place that you can actually go and get these notes.
You might go to your GP to get a fit note. Have you tried to get a GP appointment recently, Mr. Thompson?
Yes, I have actually.
Have you managed to get it within 3 days? I
did actually, as it happened, but I think that was probably one of the reasons why getting a fit note was actually a broader situation.
It's a broader problem because GPs will say they don't write fit notes for anything fewer than 7 days of sick. And you're asking people to, one, get an appointment with a GP, two, get something that they're not normally willing to give, and three, to do that in such a timely fashion that they can get the pay when they get paid. I mean, you must recognise that this is very, very difficult for your workers to achieve. This is just a way of being mean to them, really, isn't it?
No, I disagree with that. And as I said, we have around about 4%, around 350 or so outstanding questions which will go through the normal process that we'll put right. But that is 350 out of around about 10,000. Okay. You know, around about 10,000. I think it's important context. I think the other thing as well is that having a look at our sickness policy versus the competition and versus what is the norms of the industry, it is a fabulous policy.
I understand.
It's fabulous policy.
You made that point last time, but I just want to focus on this issue because this was the testimony you gave to us last time, that for the first 3 days of absence in any year, you will get full pay. And I'm telling you today that we've had evidence that that policy is not being implemented. So can I just ask, if one of your workers has been off and the only way they can prove they've been genuinely sick enough to be off is to get a fit note from a GP, if they can't get an appointment with the GP or they can't get a fit note, how else do you think they should prove that they were genuinely sick enough to get sick pay?
That's actually a good question. I don't know how to answer that. Ricky, what would you do operationally?
They need to get a fit note.
They need to get a fit note, yeah.
And if they can't get a fit note, it's then your decision that they're not genuinely sick?
Well, many have produced fit notes, and that's why our pay has been reinstated very quickly. So not all GP surgeries clearly have the same policy.
Okay. We've got about half an hour left, so what I'm going to suggest to members is I'll give you all 5 minutes and you can ask whatever questions you like, whether it's about sick pay or broader questions.
Chair, can I just, on the issue...
Very briefly, if you like.
Very briefly.
A couple of minutes.
We've got evidence to show that, with regard to the sick notes, that a young woman with mental health problems had her pay stopped by Royal Mail. and she had to use food banks. She's got 2 kids. She's got severe mental health problems. And we also have seen that disabled workers have had their workloads increased without any review. We've seen reasonable adjustments being removed without consultation. And as a level 2 disability confident employer, how do you explain this?
I'm not aware of those cases, Mr. Lavery. It would be very good if you could provide the information so we can look at that.
That's been your answer on lots of things today. You're not aware of this, you're not aware of that. This is happening without your knowledge. This is happening on the shop floor, man. This is happening to disabled people. It's happening to people who need assistance in the workplace, and yet you just basically shrug it off, saying that it's not happening.
Mr. Lavery, I haven't shut that.
Excuse me.
I haven't shut that.
And you're claiming that it's not the majority of the workforce. These are people who need help from their employer, and they're having their pay stopped. They're having to use food banks. It's not good enough, man.
Okay.
Agree.
Right. Okay. So each member will then have 5 minutes to ask questions on anything they wish. And Mark Palsy, you're up front.
I just want to go back to the point that Mr. Williams was making really earlier about the way the business is changing, and you gave us some statistics on the decline in letter business. Where do we go from here, I suppose, is my question. Do you anticipate a continued level of decline in letters in coming years? And do you see, I think you've already made approaches to reduce the frequency of letter delivery from 6 days to 5 days. Do you see that continuing to be pushed back to, back to 4 or alternative days? And how effective do you think you're going to be in competing in the parcels business?
Yeah, so on letters, to your point on letters decline, it was always envisaged that actually at the time of privatisation letters were going to decline. At that point it was put at between 4 and 6% per annum. That's accelerated to about 8% per annum, which is why you've seen that big shift from 17 billion to 8 billion.
And where do you see intended decline,
I think it will bottom out. Yeah? Okay. And that's very important for Royal Mail, because to your point on parcels, the advantage that we have at Royal Mail over other carriers is that density of letters. The fact that we go down everybody's drive every day actually gives us what I call a drop density, which would be the envy of other parcel carriers. Yep. We've got that sort of bedrock of delivery that they don't have, and that's important.
And does your workforce, in your opinion, understand the dynamic nature of the market that you're operating in? And are they coming with you on this journey? But if they're not coming with you on this journey, why aren't they coming with you on the journey?
Well, we need to take them on the journey. And I think their concerns are, if they look at other carriers, parcel carriers, and they look at the terms and conditions within those carriers, they see that is a risk to them. And what we need to give them is the assurances that is.
So why are they taking industrial action?
I think they're taking industrial action over some of the changes that we do need to make to adapt to a parcels market. And I'll give you an example, which is most people shop online in an evening and they expect delivery the next day. In some instances, we're not constructed to do that, because that's not what letters were designed. Our design on letters was trying to do. So what we're trying to do is to reshape the business into being able to deliver parcels.
But my question is, why aren't you able to persuade your workforce that that's the way things are going, and that's the change that needs to be made? Because clearly one of the reasons why you're not delivering for customers is that you've been in dispute with your workforce.
Yeah, I always put this down to the difficulty is not in shaping new ideas, it's taking away the old ones. Yeah, so we're full of lots of ideas, but actually transforming the business into that change has been a problem at Royal Mail, in all honesty, ever since about 2015. As the parcels markets accelerated, we have not adapted Royal Mail to that market.
Well, that's not my question. My question is what work are you doing to bring the workforce with you in this change that you're describing as necessary?
Well, I'll let Mr. Thompson comment directly, because this is part of the whole communications tool within Royal Mail. Yeah, all I can do is, as a board level, is actually try and, from our perspective, to bring our people along with that change, which I do through.
So, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Macaulay, why aren't the workforce buying what you're selling?
Yeah, I think some of the changes that we need are disruptive to people's working lives, and I think we just need to recognise that. So back to Keith's point as he made, we've spent £900 million in the infrastructure so that we can compete in the parcels market, and that's all being done. But if you take a midnight order, which usually has to get into our system somewhere between around about 3:30 in the morning for delivery the next day, what that actually means is that what we need from around about, at this stage, 3,000 to 5,000 of our team is to start their working day at around about midday and probably work through to the end of the day. The average length of tenure with our employees is 17 years, which is a great thing because they've got a brilliant relationship and they understand the business great. But what we're asking them to do is make quite a change for some of them in terms of that change. And it's the same with Sundays. In terms of Sundays, it's a growing business for us. At the moment, we've got about, half of the team covers that duty. The rest is actually temporary workers. We would much prefer to have the core team doing that. So I think what I recognise as the leader is I totally understand that these changes are quite a change for people's working patterns, and we have to keep talking and we have to keep explaining. Now, when I'm out and about, and I'm out and about in the operation an awful lot, is I actually think our postal workers are really smart. I think they totally understand what's going on in the market, and they totally understand that later on in the evening or on a Sunday they can see other people's vans doing the deliveries. I think they get that. I think they really do get that. They're very market alive. But of course, to make that change for them is actually quite a big change. And I think, the challenge for myself and Ricky and the rest of the senior team is to explain this in a way so that we all understand that these changes means that we all have job security for the future. The bit that I worry about is that if our current workers do not follow the work, then that by default means they have less work. And I don't really feel we fully established this.
And are you asking them to do too much too fast?
Well, again, I suppose it's a real challenge for me as the CEO, because if I actually had 10 or 15 or 20 years to change this business, I would spend 10 or 15 or 20 years to change this business. But that is not my reality. And the competitors are getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and the clock is ticking, and we need to make sure that we compete quickly and we start growing this business so we can give everyone the job security they want, because the alternative scenario is not a scenario I want as a CEO, because I don't think that's good for anyone. So if I had longer, I would take longer, but I do not have longer.
Okay, thank you. Ian Lavery, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. You just mentioned the job security issue, that job security that people want. Are you not already said that you're going to make 10,000 people redundant?
No, what we said is that we'd need to make a reduction of 10,000 FTE back in October, of which between 5,000 and 6,000 would be through voluntary redundancy. We've also been very, very clear that we will make no compulsory redundancies. And the other thing as well, Mr. Lavery, is what we've seen during this period of time, a combination of reducing agency workers, managing overtime and also attrition. Based on what we can currently see, we don't believe that it will be 5,000 to 6,000. We believe it will be less. But of course, the scenario we really want to be in, back to Mr. Pawsey's point, is growing in the parcels market so we can actually be growing our team, not in a situation where we're shrinking.
There's loads of questions that can be raised on this, Chair, and obviously we haven't got the time, but the understanding and the discussions I've had with different people is that's still on the table, still compulsory redundancies on the table. I don't know if it's been part of the negotiations, but people feel very much as if you're trying to change the business. You're bringing the white man van sort of situation in, hiring the vans and getting rid of loyal Royal Mail employees. Far from it being a situation where you're trying to secure employment, I think you're trying to do the opposite. But this from again what I've heard, it's like corporate anarchy here. one department doesn't know what the others do in senior leadership or saying it's happening in the region. It's corporate anarchy. It's so dysfunctional. It's not any surprise that there's 115,000 workers in dispute with senior management from what we heard the last time and certainly from what we've heard this time. Reportedly, there's lots of bullying and harassment in the workplace. There's union busting, there's war chests being built up, there's bragging and boasting about how you're going to smash the CWU. These are the people who are really trying. These are the people who want world-class, first-class system. And it's a shame, really, that my experience is that they're the ones fighting for this, and people who are opposed to that and who want to get rid of it, probably get rid of it to different companies, other senior leadership, perhaps people that's sitting in this room. Can I ask you about the bullying and harassment? Reportedly bullying and harassment. There's 150 disciplinary cases ongoing at this moment in time. 38% of them are CWU members or reps, and that's 1.5% of the workforce. Why would this be the case, Mr. Thompson?
Well, the information I have is that from industrial action, we've got around about 375 disciplinary cases overall. There was around about 130 of those are from CW reps. What I would also like to say is that during industrial action, the vast majority of the picket lines and the situation, people have behaved impeccably, I must say. Of those 135, there's only around about 50%. So there were around about 260 cases that were brought. So only 50% actually got us through to the disciplinary phase. My understanding is, of the 135, there's around about 38 where there's been some form of disciplinary action that has been taken. But what I would say, Mr. Lavery, is that we have all of the appeal systems in place. We are actually in discussion with the CW at this particular point in time. And we have said to them that if there's additional information that's available that needs to be put towards some of these cases, then we would be more than welcome to hear it. But I have to say, and I've been on the public record of saying this as well, is that some of the behaviours we've seen, and this is not just CW reps to be nice and clear, on the picket lines have not been things that have been acceptable, and they have to go through our disciplinary process in a very, very fair and even-mannered way.
It looks very much as if it's discrimination. Do you recognise the term Gold Command and Silver Command and Bronze Command?
Yes, I do, actually.
What do you want to explain that very briefly?
Yeah, sure. During industrial action or any form of crisis, we do have a situation where we implement a crisis management system, which will deal with issues on industrial action days that actually goes through a process. I will actually sit on the Gold Command at the senior part of the organisation as well, so that we have decision making in a very structured way during times of when things are not normal.
And have you ever intervened personally in any disciplinary hearing?
In a disciplinary hearing, no.
Because we've got evidence to show that you have.
Well,
an email to the fact that you've actually intervened in a personal capacity with an individual. And if you're saying that you haven't, we actually have got email evidence.
Mr. Lavery, I'd like to see that, because I'm not aware of having done that. So
you're saying that you haven't personally intervened
not in my memory mind, but if there's something that's saying
no,
it's different,
you're backing yourself each way again here. You say, like you've done through the whole of the last hearing and this hearing, you're backing every horse in every race, saying not to your recollection. I'm asking you a simple question, and you would know if you've intervened in a single case or any other case. You would know that as like the chief executive.
I, as a chief executive, do absolutely not make any decisions in relation to people being, whatever happens in a disciplinary hearing. I do not make those decisions. They are made separate from me by a human resources group.
You were saying before about what this fantastic mandate you had from 50,000 people. What about the fantastic mandate the CWU have had, the recent ballot? I think it was suggested that you were wanting to test the resolve of the workforce. Does the emphatic ballot result, the turnout of 77.3%, the yes vote 95.9%, does that answer your question with testing the resolve of the workforce?
Look, I think it's clear that with that ballot result that came the other day, that, you know, that we need to find a way of making sure that the team can embrace the change. And what we'd like to do, and we're working that again this week, is making sure that we, that we get an agreement with the CWU. And back to your point that you mentioned earlier on, Mr. Lavery, when I came in as the CEO first, and I think my first ever presentation to the market was in May, and I think I started around about the January time. When I went and did that presentation, I actually had Terry Pullinger, who was actually the representative CW at that point in time. I actually sat him around the table with me in my very, very first presentation to have a different approach where we worked with the CWU to actually take the business forward. It's a real personal disappointment for me where we are actually in the situation that we're in.
And just finally, it does appear, doesn't it? It appears to anybody that the people who are wanting that first class business in provision for Royal Mail parcels, letters, the Universals, USO, etc. It's the people that are on strike, the people who are losing the money, who are like fighting the most for this world-class service that being provided from Royal Mail. And it looks very much as if the people sitting in this room today on the panel are the ones who are looking in the opposite direction. Why do you think it's the people who are losing money, who want this first-class provision, this first-class service? Why are they losing money and years are basically working against everything they're fighting for?
Well, I think we all want the same thing. I think we all want to grow the business. And I think one thing that we're definitely aligned with the union on is the bit that's magical for us, which is that great trust at the doorstep and the fact that we go everywhere and that relationship we have with the customer. So I think that we're very, very much united on. I think we're very much united. I came to grow the business, you know, I mean, as I said in my letter very clearly.
What cost?
Well, if we don't grow the business, then there will be a bigger cost. So I think we all need to get ourselves focused on growing the business, you know, and I said it in my letter and I'll say it again here for the record. You know, Royal Mail matters to me, it certainly matters to our people and it matters to our customer. Now we collectively need to find a way of growing this business and embracing the opportunity we have, because if we don't change, then the outcome is not going to be a good outcome.
The difference is, of course, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Williams, Mr. McCauley will move on to pastures new with a new company, whereby the people who are fighting, who are on strike now, rely on the Royal Mail for future employment for decades to come. Years will not, and you'll not be certainly asking for universal credit, because you'll get huge payoffs come what may. And it doesn't matter how successful you might be at Royal Mail in introducing and implementing what you want to implement, you'll all do very well from the business. Other people will not. That's the difference.
Mr. McCauley's done 36 and a half years in this business.
I'm not criticising Mr. McCauley at all.
We're going to have to accept that as a view, not a question, because of time. I'm so sorry. Andy McDonald, please.
5 minutes for questions. Mr. McCauley, do managers receive bonuses based on the volume of parcels delivered?
No, they don't.
They don't get bonuses? There's no financial incentive?
To deliver parcels over letters, no, there's not. No.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, how many Royal Mail workers are agency and temporary staff? And
it's around about 8% currently. It's 60% less than what we had during our peak period, and during our peak period of Christmas time this year was less than what we had the previous year.
Have you got plans to increase that ratio?
No, our plan is actually to decrease it. Well, you know, and one of the things that we really, really want, and I talked about it earlier on in terms of following the work. If you take a Sunday as a for instance, around about half of our Sunday is covered by our core team. The other half is covered by temporary workers. What would be a really great outcome is that if all of Sundays are actually covered by the core team, which was part of our agreement we had with the CWU around 24/7 working. We want the core team to do the work, but what I'd also say, Mr. McDonald, which is an important point, is that we have to follow the work, we have to be able to deliver the service that the customers want. And if our team don't want to do that work...
I'm sorry to interrupt, I wanted to know whether you wanted to increase the numbers of agency staff and staff. You've said no, so I'm content with your answer. Can I move on the time it's available to me to ask you about sick pay? Because you told us last time that the Royal Mail is in discussions about making some sick pay adjustments that would only impact on a small proportion of the team. Are there any active plans or discussions to change sick pay more broadly?
The situation we have with, well, the first thing is we are in actually discussions and negotiations with the CWU, so these are contractual terms. We can change nothing without their discussion, which I think is really important point.
Were you in those discussions when you gave us that response?
The response I gave last time, and I recommunicated in my letter, which I think you've seen as well, is that our current policy is 6 months full pay, 6 months half pay, and we discussed some of that topic earlier on. Our proposal at this point in time that needs to be agreed with the CWU is that the 3 days of the second absence would be at statutory sick pay. Now, the point I made last time was that the vast majority of the team only take a day or a day and a half sickness per year. So therefore, the vast majority of the team will not be impacted by this proposed change.
Well, of course, but those people who had an illness or a recurrent illness are the very ones that are going to be prejudiced. So anyone with a second absence in 12 months would be subject to statutory sick pay under the proposals. Do you think that's equitable? Do you think that's fair?
Well, for the first 3 days, but we do have a situation, if it is a long-term illness or it is something else that is really unfortunate, we do actually have the ability to make sure that that is not the case. The other thing I would add is very recently I went to a delivery office actually in Surrey. They had 31 walks. When I arrived there were 11 walks that weren't covered due to sickness. The reality around that is that I would suggest that it is almost impossible to deliver a quality of service, particularly on a USO letter product or whatever else it might be, if you've actually got nearly a third of the team that are absent.
Absolutely. And so the 18% sickness rate that Mr. Williams referred to, that tells you there's something very wrong at the heart of your business.
That was it during COVID, just to be clear.
But the rates that we're talking about now, Mr. Thompson is talking about high levels of sickness absence. Doesn't that tell you something is wrong with your business if you're having high levels of sickness absence?
Well, our current sickness absence rate is around about 8%. Pre-COVID was around about 5 or so percent. So we've seen a 50% increase from that. Okay. It is 2 to 3 times the industry norm. So I recognise
indeed
that the sickness levels are higher than the norms, and these are. But that sickness level that's higher is in a smaller proportion of the team. That is not the vast majority of the team are a day or a day and a half a year.
We're hearing from the CWU that people who ring in and report that they're sick, managers have told them that they risk losing pay if they call in sick. And that's a widespread problem. You talked about 350 workers being under that regime, but the CWU report there are 600 members who've made a claim against Royal Mail for unpaid sick pay. I mean, that is a pretty damning indictment, and all those claims are verified by ACAS and the CWU. Expects more to be submitted in the near future. Isn't that a damning indictment that those sick pay claims have gone unpaid?
Well, Mr. MacDonald, as I said earlier on, the information I have, and we'll validate it after the meeting, because I did check before I came in today, is that what we see is around about the 350 number. I don't recognise the 600 number. It may well be that they're still coming through the system. And that's why I said that 350 numbers are around about 4% of the total sick days that we've actually been paying out.
In a couple of minutes I've got left, Mr. Williams, do you have a view of the Royal Mail's last appearance at the Select Committee? And do you think Mr. Thompson's appearance has negatively affected Royal Mail's reputation?
I think Mr. Thompson sought to give you the answers to the questions that you asked at that appearance. I think that in terms of, and you saw the CWU behind the screen, which you referred to, using it for the purposes of promoting the industrial action. And I don't think that's helpful in resolving the industrial action.
Okay. Yeah. Is it right that you're chair both of IDS Royal Mail and of Halfords?
I am indeed, yes.
What's your compensation for both those roles?
So at Royal Mail I'm paid £310,600 and at Halfords I'm paid £180,000.
And my understanding is that the Royal Mail recently agreed a deal with Halfords to expand the existing contract to outsource large sections of their fleet maintenance activities. Is that right?
No, it's not right. Because I know this one because a journalist was given this story. We've got a fleet of 56,000 vehicles. We did 40 jobs apparently, 40 single jobs at a cost of £8,500.
You're saying...
And I was totally unaware of that, obviously.
There's no tension, there's no conflict.
There is no
concerned.
conflict at all.
And finally then, Mr Williams, I understand that you've now met with the CWU, is that right?
I have, yes. I met Mr Ward last week. I'd met with the TUC before that. I met Mr
What
Ward.
has taken you so long to meet with the CWU?
I met Mr Ward last July. I'm not involved into the date of the dispute, obviously. I have met Mr Ward last week, and that was to outline the seriousness of the situation that we're in, not only for employees, but also for customers and the state of the business. And I'm hoping that through the intervention of Sir Brendan Barber, who's well respected at the TUC and at ACAS, that actually there will be further talks in the next few weeks, which, given the seriousness of the situation, will be overseen by the board.
Okay, thank you. 5 minutes. Alan Brown.
Back to PDA and monitoring or not monitoring. It's explained to me that vans sitting idling for a certain amount of time would automatically result in a chat for management as well. Is that normal practice?
Ricky?
Yeah, it's information that comes from telemetry system. It's not coming from PDAs, and it's pretty commonplace in commercial vehicles to have telemetry systems, and we do encourage drivers not to idle. It's not great for the planet, it pollutes the planet, and if they're parked up, to turn the engine off if they're parked for a prolonged period. But again, those would be inquiries about what created the idling time, and to get the engine switched off where we can.
And we accept the argument about emissions, but it would be acceptable for guys to take a break with engine idling so they can actually catch a heat, particularly guys with health conditions, for example.
Definitely, yeah, and if that was the explanation, that they were on a break and the temperatures were very cool and they put the heating on, then that would be very reasonable.
You wouldn't expect follow-up chats after that?
I wouldn't, no.
Right, okay. Mr Thompson, you gave it, the last time you were here, you spoke about going out and about with the postman. You mentioned actually being out in operational procedures today. Now, every single postie I spoke to expressed concerns about the PDA, and their feeling, you might disagree, but their absolutely universal feeling that PDA has been used to monitor them, and it is a tool to manage performance, hence regular chats. So that was a unanimous feeling. So if you regularly go out with postmen, how have you not picked up on that concern that these posties have?
It's interesting, Mr. Brown, because I have not had, I mean, I am out and about constantly, and I go everywhere unannounced. I jump in my car, drive myself, and I just arrive there unannounced and have the discussion. I have not, to my recollection, had a direct conversation with a postie on that topic. But what I would say is if I go out and about, I would ask them to come and speak to me about it.
Because further to what Andy was asking earlier on, it's querying why you haven't put out clarifications about use of PDA since the committee evidence the last time. You wrote the letter to us saying it's not used for performance management, but obviously you haven't written out and clarified that with management. So did you not think even about asking posties, just like what I was talking about there? So you've been out and about, did you not even think to have that conversation then?
Well, I did. I went, one of the evidence pieces that was given here was actually from a place down in Medway in Kent, where, the poster had been showed, and I've said, that clearly was not acceptable. When I went down there, I did have a discussion with the team down there, including the local rep as well. And we did actually discuss that particular topic.
And just in answer to question 76, the last evidence session, you'd explained that you're making sure that during industrial action, make sure that NHS letters were prioritised or separated.
Yes.
But there's subsequently been evidence given to the committee that, they might be separated at a source, but then they're just put back in, in the regular frames with the regular letters and parcels, and then they might or might not get delivered on time. So do you accept that evidence?
Ricky?
So the prioritisation happens upstream, so they go to the front end of a letter processing, so they will arrive in the delivery unit faster than other letters with the opportunity to be delivered. But you're quite right, they'll be delivered along with other letters, and therefore if there is a delay, it should only be for a day, because every other day, if a route's not going out, we always try and get to next day. So it's a one-day delay, but it is prioritised upstream in the network to get it the best.
It's pointless prioritising upstream if they then just go back into the frames with the rest of the mail, surely.
It does make a difference. It'll maybe take a day or two out of the process upstream, so it definitely gets them to our customers that are waiting on them sooner.
How much quicker do the NHS letters get delivered to the delivery depots compared to the other?
It would vary unit to unit. As I said earlier, and I'm not trying to be evasive in any way, 1,250 delivery units. Some will recover the next day and will be clearing the next day because people have worked during industrial action. Others will take 2 to 3 to 4 days to recover the network. The bulk recover within 3 to 4 working days. Some have got a tail, and that's where the regional teams will look to move resource about and support the earliest possible recovery.
If it's 3 to 4 days to recover the backlog, then the prioritised NHS letters still can be caught up in that 3 to 4 day backlog.
Because what I said is that we would, if there's a part of a route hasn't went out, it would be covered the next day. That's a process. That's what we.
Absolutely, and that's across the board then.
Yes, that's the approach.
Right. That'll be interesting.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our time and our questions today. Mr. Thompson, I had hoped that you might come here today to apologise for any misunderstanding, but instead you've said you misheard the question and you've blamed basically everybody else for the problems that we've presented to you today. Might I just politely suggest that good leadership requires some humility and your ability to bring people with you. How long are you willing for this situation to carry on at Royal Mail before you change your position to resolve it?
Well, what I would say, Chair, is of course I apologise if there's been if I have not been clear, and that was my purpose of writing to you and coming back today. You know, I want Royal Mail to be a great business. It's why I came. I knew it would be really, really difficult, and we are making some difficult changes. And I think we would all like a situation where everybody is pointing in the same direction and growing this business. That's definitely what I would like. But this is not an easy task. You know, we are making changes that have been overdue for some time. There are some very difficult changes that we need to make. But what I'm focused on and what I'm interested in is growing the business so that the great team that we have can actually have the long-term job security that it is that they deserve. Now, unfortunately, that does mean at times that I am not going to be popular. But I think I'd be an awful lot less popular if I didn't put the changes in and let this great institution actually grow.
Okay. Mr. Williams, one of the, I think, defining features of the nearly, I think I got through about 1,000 emails. I didn't get personally through the 1,500. But through the 1,000 emails that I read over many evenings at home was a repeated claim in those emails from workers across your business that they were scared, they were intimidated. They didn't want their names, their locations, their information to be disclosed because they were fearing that they would be sacked. I mean, from a culture perspective, irrespective of the performance issues, the money issues, the breach of the USO, surely you as a chairman of the board and as the board, you're deeply troubled by that. So I ask you the same question. How long are you willing for this to go on before you resolve it?
Well, I think what will help in the short term is resolution of the industrial action, because clearly that has been a bitter experience for all the staff. Not only have they lost money, but you know their feeling about Royal Mail is in decline at the same time, and that's why I think getting a resolution to the industrial action is in the interests of everybody. As I said to Mr. Lavery, that we are now trying to implement a process with the union to resolve the industrial action, and I think that in the short term is the best way of making progress.
Okay, we've timed out, unfortunately. If I could ask members, if possible, to stay in the room, if that's all right, and for members of the public gallery and witnesses to leave the room, I'd be grateful. I'll now bring the session formally to an end. Order, order.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.